The role of the leader is to define reality and to give hope. And if you think about it, for the last couple of years, we've been defining reality as the age of great change. One of the things we know about the age of great change is it's really hard to know what's going to come next. So when it comes to defining reality, I actually go back to another thought from a leader. And in case you don't know, the guy on the left is Bill Clinton. And he spoke to our Leadership 300 group a couple of years ago, and he said something that really stuck with me. Forget the headlines, focus on the trend lines. And I think it's really insightful, because if you just looked at the headlines over the course of our lifetimes, at least those of us who have been around for a bit longer, it would be easy to lose the forest for the trees. And what I mean by that is, if you saw these headlines alone, would you really have an idea that we have lived through the greatest rise in prosperity in the history of humanity? On the other hand, if you look at the trend lines, it tells you a pretty clear story. And that's a story of a lot more people in a lot more places with a lot more money. Which for us, by the way, is a really good thing. I mean, if your company is a high-end, global branded company with a passion for being first, it really does feel like the world is tilting in your favor. But in a changing world, as they say, there is no future in the past. So that brings me to a provocative question. Were we just lucky? Because the fact is, circumstances have a lot to do with success, sometimes even more than we realize. Now, some of you may have read this book, Outliers, by a guy named Malcolm Gladwell. As you read it, you realize it boils down to three pretty fundamental things. First, they were born in the right place at the right time. The second is they were really good at what mattered. And third, equally important, they worked really hard. So here's one example, Bill Gates. So when Bill Gates was a teenager, he happened to go to one of the only schools in the world that had free access to a computer. And you can see in the picture, he was a bit of a geek. So instead of going out and sneaking out for beers at night, he was sneaking out to go write code. And what happened was he amassed something like 10,000 hours of programming time and was one of the only teenagers in the world who'd done that. And it was just in time for the PC revolution of the 1970s. Talk about being really good at what matters at exactly the right time. Okay, so here's another example, the Beatles. So they, again, born at a great time, if you think about it this way, at the dawn of rock and roll. And I'm not going to get the accent right on this, Michael, but the lads from Liverpool, I almost want to hear you say that, but we'll get to that later. The lads from Liverpool were not cutting it in London. So they did what anybody would do. They moved to Germany. And by the way, Frankfurt in February? Sorry. Okay, so they actually went to Hamburg's red light district to play music. In fact, what they were able to do is they were able to play 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, I almost said 8 days a week. But here's the point. Before they got their big break, they had played something like 1,200 concerts, which is more than most rock stars play in their entire careers. So they were ready for the revolution of rock and roll. But I think it's not just people, and it's not just rock bands that can be outliers. I think companies can too. And that brings me back to us. Because you could say that we happen to be a global high-end branded company at a time when that really matters. And in fact, if you could pick anything to be good at, that would pretty much be it. What's interesting too is if you look back, in some respects, the fact that we are who we are is a little bit of a happy accident. It's not just grand vision. Because in reality, the reason ITT Sheraton built its first international hotels was so they didn't have to pay US taxes on their telecom profits overseas. In any case, just like Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, we came of age at the right time, and we worked really hard to be good at what matters. Running great hotels, building local smart teams, and driving brands and innovation. So looking ahead, maybe the question shouldn't be, were we just lucky? Maybe the question should be, how do we continue to be outliers? Because in the age of great change, I think, is that for me? Deciding what to be really good at, I think, is the central strategic question. And why that's important is, if you look at companies that are outliers, they're held up as excellent companies, good to great companies, at some point they all lose their edge. They outperform their peers for a long time, but not forever, because success is not a birthright. And in the age of great change, no company can continue to do the same thing it's always done and expect the same result. It's like a new definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing and expecting the same result. And the point is that sticking to your strategy is a great idea until it's not. I mean, just think about BlackBerry or Kodak or Nokia. Now for us, the good news is, in a globally connected world, what's made us successful, it still matters a lot. But in the age of great change, it's just important to start to get out in front with the way that technology is changing what our guests and our customers are expecting.